To say that Cyberpunk 2077 had a bit of a flawed launch would be an understatement. I mean, it performed so poorly on last-gen consoles it was almost unplayable. Not that it was much better on a high-end PC. And that's even ignoring the bugs that would show up, both amusing and game-breaking. But things have seemingly changed, and CD Projekt has been working a lot to get the game to the state it really should have been back in 2020. And if the response online is anything to go by, it seems to have been working. But that of course begs a question. Were bug fixes and patches all the game really needed to get fixed? Or were the problems more fundamental? Cyberpunk 2077 is a first-person action RPG based on a similarly named and mechanically complex tabletop game. You play as V, a mercenary for hire who, when a job goes wrong, gets the undead soul of rocker-turned-terrorist Johnny Silverhand injected into them. Truly a fate worse than death.
Fuck me.
This tangles you into a corporate conspiracy as you race to save your life. And that's where one of my big issues with the game comes into play: the pacing. Throughout the main story, you're often reminded that V is dying.
You, don't got a lot of time left, kid.
But that doesn't seem to stop you from spending hours competing in races, doing odd jobs, and terrorizing the locals. I mean, to go full-on 2010s games journalist, it's some pretty solid ludonarrative dissonance. Like, to be fair, I get it. I don't expect a full-on mainstream game to pull the Shenmue, and like you literally run out of time to complete the main story if you spend too much time buying Sonic Gachapon, but I do wish the gameplay emphasized the sense of urgency more. What's less easy to excuse is the overall pacing. A lot of the game's best side missions only start to show up towards the beginning of the third act, which not only means you're going to be constantly told to meet Hanako at Embers anytime you finish a side quest, but it also means you can fairly easily miss some of the more optional missions. I mean, there's entire characters you can avoid meeting if you're not careful. At the very least, a lot of these side missions are good. Not all of them. I mean, the game has its fair share of filler missions, and it also has jobs which are ads. Just advertisements. There's one that's an ad for edge runners, and you know what, I'll accept that. It's at least an ad for something in the Cyberpunk franchise. And I'll even kind of accept the Witcher 4 ad I got on the game's launcher once. But what's less acceptable is the mission that's an ad for Blattrope, because the marketing team on this game weren't aware of the genre printed on the box. But yeah, even the rest of the side jobs are a mixed bag. There's some genuinely fantastic side quests in there, where you're investigating political conspiracies, learning more about side characters' pasts, becoming a racer, or helping a robot car reconnect with its children. It makes sense in context. But there's also some real duds. I mean, sure, the fight this super tough cyber psycho enemy who's showing up nearby missions aren't the best, though sometimes they're interesting. But there's also some bigger side missions which I just didn't care for, either because they're annoying fan service.
Hey you! I gotta get to a Ripper, man!
Or because it just felt like any other big, massive, open world game fetch quest. But yeah, I'd say the character quests are probably the game's best. Though that's probably helped a lot by the quality of the writing for the cast. This might be controversial to say, but I originally wasn't looking forward to spending 20 some odd hours with Keanu Reeves, but he manages to play Johnny Silverhand fairly well. But the game's also managed to populate its world with a nice mix of characters, with basically no weak links. Genuinely, one of the best side quests in the game is one where you get to learn more about the backstory of probably my favourite side character, Judy, and while the interesting setting helps a lot, I think the overall character writing is a big draw for it. About the only character I didn't end up loving was V, not because they're necessarily bad, but because they could have been so much more. If you're familiar with the original tabletop RPG series, then you'll be aware that it has what it calls the life path system, which is, in my opinion, the best part of the game. When you create a character, you end up rolling dice to determine not only their stats, like most RPGs, but also their backstory, where they grew up, who they grew close to, what tragedies befell them. Back when I played Cyberpunk Red, I ended up with a nomad whose clan died at the hands of his ex-boyfriend. It's great, I loved it. Cyberpunk 2077 also has something it calls the life path system, but this ain't it, chief. It's really more akin to any other RPG video game's backstory options. You choose one of 3 preset backstories, all of which end up coalescing into the game's main story, barring like one specific mission and some dialogue options. Like, I get it from a technical point of view, and I get that this is supposed to be V's life path, not the player's, but if that's the case, I'd rather get a more fleshed out character like Geralt in The Witcher. I'd also be remiss not to discuss the romance in the game. Like a lot of modern RPGs, you get your choice of folks for your character to fall in love with. I decided to go for River Ward on account of him having a genuinely interesting backstory and set of side missions, and the fact he's pretty easy on the eyes helps a lot.
To us.
Whoa!
Sorry, I thought...
What are you doing?
So I decided to go for Kerry Eurodyne on account of the fact that he's the only option you get if you want to play V as a gay guy. The romance as a whole is fine. Or at least inoffensive. Yes, I'd like at least one more male gay option, but I can't complain too much, it's a typical video game romance. What I can complain about is the sex scenes. This is a YouTube video, so I won't go into it too much, but I'll put it like this. I once said Mass Effect 3 gave us the awkward sex scene to end all awkward sex scenes, but it's been solidly usurped by Cyberpunk. But hey, this is an action RPG, not a dating sim, so more important is the actual gameplay, which is largely inoffensive, if not necessarily my favorite. I'll admit, probably like a decent amount of people nowadays, I've started to grow a bit tired of big open world RPGs and action games. You're either going full on video game and fast traveling across the map half the time, or you're spending time stuck in virtual traffic while hopping between missions. And it honestly doesn't help matters that the game suffers from the same issue that a lot of open world RPGs do, which is that for as big as this city is, it feels empty. You get some moments of environmental storytelling to be sure, and there's occasionally some fun Easter eggs you can happen across. But I'll still prefer a smaller and more detailed feeling environment, like the version of Prague and Mankind Divided, any time of the week. What I did end up getting along with was the combat. I'll admit, I'm not a massive shooter fan. I tend to find myself preferring to ghost my way through a level as opposed to running in guns blazing, but I do enjoy Cyberpunk's combat. Part of that might be the fact the game doesn't really make stealth much of a valid option, and part of it might be the fact that, unlike the RPG the game is based on, you're not literally rolling dice to figure out if you hit, and then how much damage you did, which was something that legit killed a Cyberpunk Red campaign my friend was running. What I wasn't as into was the net running in the game. To heavily simplify and probably annoy some people, net running is effectively the game's hacking mechanic. I don't know if it's simply how simplified it is versus the tabletop game, though maybe that's a good thing, or if I just don't care that much for hacking mechanics, but I rarely found myself using it outside of when the game needed me to. What I did find myself using quite a bit, despite also having its own fair share of issues, was driving. Obviously a big part of the issue here is that I'm playing on a PC with a keyboard and a mouse. That was never going to be great, but I feel even less in control with a car in this game than I do in many others, though there are two things redeeming it. For one, it's a lot better with a controller, and the game will let you swap between keyboard, mouse, and controller fairly seamlessly. And for two, the game added auto drive. It's not great though. I legitimately can't tell if this is meant to be a joke or not, but the auto drive is a terrible driver. It's hesitant at times where it really shouldn't, which in the context of playing a game is more amusing than anything, but it's also not uncommon for it to just get stuck, not know what to do, and release control back to the player. Like, it feels like a proof of concept, though it could also just be that it's using the same programming that major NPCs use when driving. I've legit had River drive over my bike, Pan Am hit my car, and Claire outright hit V when driving off. And riding with them doesn't feel much better. I also had some issues with the brain dances, though those were more related to user interface than to gameplay. But first, a warning. If you're someone who's experienced photosensitive epilepsy, I think it's important that you're aware that the brain dance sequences were originally known to trigger this. Now my understanding is that this is due to visual effects that played at the beginning and the end of these sequences, something that I won't be showing in the video. That said, I would still recommend avoiding watching the screen until this time code, 10 minutes 23 seconds, which I'll let you know when we get to that if you can't skip ahead. But yeah, anyway, brain dances. I love the concept. In universe, they're effectively a recording of someone's experience, the sights, the smells, the sounds, and the things they didn't even know they experienced. When the game makes use of it as a way to solve a detective's case or to plan a mission, it's great. But there's a few issues. I found the UI kind of clunky. I don't know if it's just a case of dumbing down for consoles and controllers, but I'm a video editor. Just let me manipulate a playhead. I also found it wasn't uncommon for me to really have to search to find the specific thing the game wanted me to find. And like, I get it, that's probably user error, but the visual style when you get away from the person you're following really doesn't help. But still, I can't help but think the mechanic by itself could honestly work as a standalone game. Maybe just work some more on the UI. And the animations. Speaking of animations, it's safe to look back now. Also speaking of animations, Cyberpunks are good? I'll admit, I'm not really the best judge for animation quality, but outside of some very canned looking animations on the NPCs, and some occasional wonkiness with faraway cars, there's nothing too noticeably wrong with the animation here. And speaking of NPCs, Cyberpunk does suffer a bit from the same problem a lot of big open world games do. A lack of variety in the NPCs that show up. Like, it's common to see the same person on screen multiple times, and it really doesn't help much with the city feeling empty and lifeless. Though, as someone who loves neon-lit cityscapes, Cyberpunk definitely has its moments, especially when it's raining. It does lose a lot of its charm when you get into the day, and I do find myself wishing it was a little bit more stylized. Speaking of visuals, Cyberpunk also makes pretty heavy use of ray tracing, to the point where it was Nvidia's poster child for the tech, but I also know I don't care that much. Like, I think it looks nice, but it doesn't look nice enough for me to want to really sacrifice that much performance or visual fidelity in order to get it. If you do want ray tracing, you do at the very least have options for frame generation and upscaling, which will get you closer to good performance, though at the expense of some occasional visual weirdness and some softness. Personally, I'm just going to keep ray tracing off though. We've talked looks, let's talk sound. The game's original soundtrack is good. It's a mix of industrial electronic and more traditional ambient music. Though, for as much as I like it, I don't tend to listen to it much outside of the game. The game's also borrowed a page from GTA's playbook and added radio stations to the car, which is a nice touch. They're a genre-appropriate mix of rock, metal, hip-hop, and electronic, plus a jazz and blues station for good measure, so there's a chance you'll find something you get along with. The sound design as a whole is pretty solid. Cars sound powerful, except when they shouldn't. Guns sound meaty, and punches have an impact. And the UI sound effects also contrast pretty well to the sound design. Though of course, the best graphics and sound in the world aren't going to excuse poor performance. And that is, still to this day, one of Cyberpunk's biggest flaws. It is a lot better than the original launch, to be sure, but I still wouldn't call it a good performing game on the PC. Or at least not a consistent performer. I can get good frame rates on my 3070 with nice looking settings at 4K, admittedly for the use of DLSS, but there's still times where it would drop below 60 FPS. Which is still a massive improvement over the original launch version of the game, where it randomly dropped to the low 20s and became a generally stuttering mess with no real way to resolve it. The PS5 version of the game was also much better on this newer patch. I had set the performance mode in the settings and I never really had any issues with nasty frame dips or performance hiccups. Though I'll admit I'm also less sensitive to that when I'm playing on my TV than I am on my PC monitor. I was also surprised by how well it ran on the Mac. If you're not aware, Cyberpunk got a port to the Mac last year and it's one of the better Mac ports I've seen. It's Apple Silicon exclusive, which probably helps a lot with optimization. And it's also helped by the inclusion of Apple's Metal FX upscaling and system-specific graphic profiles. Honestly, I'm playing a video that'll go far more into this soon, so I won't talk too much about it at the moment, but I'll leave it at this. If you want to run Cyberpunk and all you have is a modern Mac, you can do one hell of a lot worse than this. I think it's important to point out that I actually do like Cyberpunk. I mean, hell, even back when it first launched, I still liked it quite a bit. I just found it incredibly flawed. But as someone who prefers a smaller, more detailed and more intimate world to explore any day of the week, the fact that I gave Cyberpunk over 30 hours of my life, twice, really says something. But I guess I should answer the question I posed at the start. Are Cyberpunk's issues deeper than poor performance and a rushed release? And I think so. For me personally, I think a lot of that is just simply the fact that it is a big open world game. To be clear, I've seen far worse. I've played the single player MMO that is Dragon Age Inquisition, and I'm willing to accept that for a lot of people, my biggest complaint is going to be their biggest boon. At the end of the day, if you're a fan of the genre, fan of open world games, or you're just looking for something new to dig around in, you can do far worse than Cyberpunk.